Hello, my soul-seeking friends. It's Shanna. Thank you so much for listening to Sense of Soul podcast. Enlightening conversations with like-minded souls from around the world, sharing their journey of finding their light within, turning pain into purpose, and awakening to their true sense of soul. If you like what you hear, show me some love and rate, like, and subscribe. And consider becoming a Sense of Soul Patreon member, where you will get ad-free episodes, monthly circles, and much more. Now go grab your coffee, open your mind, heart, and soul. It's time to awaken. Today we have with us Iona Jenkins. She is an author, creative writer, and poet with an MA in education. Along Iona's journey, she has been a hypnotherapist and counselor, achieving many accreditations and professional diplomas, and she even taught French. And since her journey has led her to a land more relaxed, a creative life, her long-held dream of sharing vision of beauty, harmony, and peace. After meditating with Tibetan Buddhists in London, then studying mindfulness, Iona found herself a spiritual home with the Order of the Bards, Ovates, and Druids. She is also a companion of Chalice Well, supporting the trust ethos of many paths, one source. She's joining us today to tell us about her beautiful poetic book, To Sing with Bards and Angels, an invitation to travel through landscapes invoked by beautiful language into heart of nature and imagination. And she likes labyrinths, and I can't wait to hear all about that. So welcome, Iona.
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing? Well, you're awfully pretty, Iona. Is that your assistant?
Yes, thank you.
Hi.
Assistant husband. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm very excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. I had a listen to 3 of your the Sacred Feminine Goddess podcast. I really enjoyed it, and Bridget, of course, is very special to me too, being following a Druid path. I've got a St. Bridget's cross on my wall. Yeah,
I actually had ordered one from Ireland.
So the Druids celebrate the eight festivals of the year, and Imbolc, of course, is the first fire festival after the winter solstice, and that's when the snowdrops appear and the first little flowers and the promise of spring and the lambs. So it's really quite special. And she was special to the bardic grade of the Druids, the poets, the storytellers, the actors, the musicians, the people that kept the stories and the legends alive around the campfires in old Celtic times. Now, of course, modern bards are a little bit different, but some people still like campfires. That's how that works. She's a goddess of poetry, creativity, healing, and the smithy was in olden times. And she's related to animals because of the new birth, of course, which you already know. And her color is green.
And it was so unbelievable because my daughter had kind of seen her first before me. My little girl, she has seen almost all of the things that I've experienced right before me.
How old is she?
She's 11.
Wow. That's brilliant. She's brought that with her, obviously.
She'll just mention something like she did with Bridget. She said, "Oh, I have a new angel that visited me last night." And I was like, "Oh," and she said, "Yeah, she has a long green dress with burgundy trim and long red hair." And I was like, "Oh." And then I had learned of Bridget right after. And so I was looking at the pictures of Bridget going, this sure does looking like what my daughter just told me. Yeah.
It's amazing what they come out with.
Gosh, one of my favorite movies, and I hope that you know it, is Labyrinth with David Bowie.
I do know it. I do know it.
My favorite. My kid's favorite too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I do know it.
And actually, it was probably about 5 years ago. She was probably like 5 or 6. And we went to this gemstone store, and the woman who worked there actually ended up being, I didn't know, but she was the high priestess of Denver. That's where I live, Denver in Aurora, Colorado.
Okay, yeah.
But I didn't know this at the time. And she kind of had a creepy voice. I'm going to be honest. She was like, "My, aren't you pretty?" You know? And then she tells my daughter, "Well, you look just like a fairy." So then she opens this book and she says, "Look, right here, you look like this one." And then she told me the artist, and the artist happened to be the same original artist for Labyrinth.
Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I was like, I remember that fairy in that movie, and she was biting people. But there again, more folk tales and stories that are passed down.
And I guess that's a quest to rescue the child, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Kind of felt that way.
Yes. All on that quest to rescue the inner child.
Right. Your inner child. Oh, that is so true. Yes. So where do you live at?
I live on the south coast of Wales.
Okay.
I don't know if you know much about the UK, but it's divided into different countries. It's the United Kingdom of England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And we're in the southwest. And our symbol is a red dragon on a flag. Now, I'm actually English, but my husband is Welsh.
Oh.
And I'm sitting on a cliff here. I've got the sea. If I go and I live in a flat, but I guess you call those condos. I go to the door, I can open my patio door, and I'm on a balcony, and the sea's right in front of me. And I can see right across the sea to the shores of England, because it dips in there, and then England juts out there, and you can see over to the shores of Somerset in England and King Arthur country.
My gosh, that is so amazing.
And that's where I found the angel in the moonlight on the sea just outside my window.
Okay. And I've had many conversations with the moon. Some of my favorite times have just been me and the moon.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, the angelic kingdom is very resonant with the sacred feminine, and that she works through them. And the inspiration I get from the angelic kingdom is actually what the sacred feminine wants. Now, I don't know if you had time to read the article I sent over to you this morning.
About you and feeling the energy of the divine feminine right there in the Vatican, huh?
I found it in the brushstrokes of Michelangelo. And actually, he was named after the Archangel Michael. So there's something in that, really, I think. Yeah. And then a sacred well in Cisterna di Latina, which is 40 minutes by train outside Rome, going south towards Naples. And just sitting outside, there is a sacred well there by the church, but sitting outside, the whole thing seemed to come together, the ancient bards, the poetry. That I've been writing poetry for a long time, but I didn't do anything with it until we moved to Wales. And then when I started to follow a druid path, I really started to think about putting it out. And that's when I started to have some success with poems in magazines. So I thought, well, I'll write a creative book. I'll be a real bard. Now, I'm not going to go and sit around a campfire. What I'm going to do is write in a creative flow, so that I write my descriptive prose as always, but it comes as a flow, and it takes in my travels, which is what you've been doing, is following your travels. Follow my travels through my life. But my life is 73 years long, so it goes back a long way. So I couldn't write it all, but I just wrote in the flow. Whatever came up, I thought I'll write. And then I had instructions from the angel on the full moon through the moon goddess. It all seemed to be coming together. Since I've been doing this podcasting and writing articles, I've come across a lot of women who are actually strong in the soul, who are actually working with those new age energies. And it's really brilliant, because I've found a lot of other women doing that.
Yeah, I would say so. I believe the divine feminine is rising. She's no longer hidden or suppressed or, buried in the Nagamati or wherever.
No, she was shouting from the Sistine Chapel ceiling. They didn't have Pope Francis then, it was Pope Benedict. But I noticed Pope Francis has been trying to, get women a bit more involved and get rid of some of the injustice. It's small beginnings, but it's a start. I do have a vision. I'm not a Catholic anymore, but I do have a vision of there being female cardinals sitting in that conclave at some time in the future. Now, I don't think it's in my lifetime, but it is coming.
You just wait till we get a pope that has a little friendly girlfriend or something on the side, and all of a sudden, they're all getting married and no more celibacy.
Well, yeah, the one we've got has made a few changes. He stopped Mary Magdalene being a prostitute. There are female deacons now. He's working on the sexual abuse of women and children, and he's actually made some inroad into that. So good on him. But then he's named after St. Francis, who was a rebel in his time.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know how. I think I was led somewhere from your post that you sent me, your blog post, and I came across just the most beautiful thing that really hit my heart about the divine feminine as well. And it says, the divine feminine goddess meets everyone equally and exactly where they are, in much the same way as the labyrinth or chalice well. She reflects the soul like a mirror, an image of the moon on water, the goddess. I mean, the vegetation in the form of the garden might also look different according to whatever aspect the feminine is currently flowing through someone's life. First of all, my whole body right now is tingling from my fingertips. My knees are tingling right now. I have goosebumps. When I read that, it was so much of my journey too.
Whilst I was reading yours this morning, I felt quite a strong resonance. Yeah. I thought this is the same path. We write it differently, but it's the same path.
I mean, in my episode where I kind of give my perception of the cosmology of creation and of Sophia, and you probably haven't gotten there. It's like maybe the 7th or 8th episode or so. I have a vision of the pistis Sophia, which would be the lesser Sophia, looking into a body of water and seeing herself, but seeing a light. Light. She doesn't realize that it's herself. And she jumps into the light. And this is how she ends up falling into the 3rd dimension. And the chalice well, and you mentioned that as well about the well. These very sacred wells that are all over. We have springs.
Well, that's good. It's just no one's put a well around them. That's same idea, though, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, they're very sacred hot springs. I one time heard a story from someone say that they would be at war or whatever with each other, and then they take a break in the hot springs together, and then they go back to war together against each other.
Oh,
sacred healing water. And well, except for the fact that they smell like egg. That is true.
Okay.
But I had discovered that my name, Shannon, means the possessor of hidden wisdom. Wisdom, and so I learned this during Sophia, wisdom being Sophia. And then I went further and I found that there was a goddess Shannon. I'm like, how many Celtic goddesses are there? Good Lord. But her story is that she jumps into the well looking for wisdom.
Okay.
And so I was jumped into some sort of hole trying to find the goddess Sophia. So, but there is so many goddesses and so many different mythological figures and archetypes, aren't there?
There's a Celtic legend, it's Irish, about a sacred well with 9 hazel trees growing around it. Now, I can't always pronounce the Irish names, so I won't. But the 9 hazel trees drop their nuts into the water. So the hazelnuts go into the water where they're eaten by salmon. Then whoever catches the salmon and eats the salmon becomes wise. So, there's a well there, and the salmon of wisdom that people can eat and become wise from the hazelnuts. The hazel tree feels quite sacred to me because if I meditate on hazel trees, I find stars. The hazel's special to me.
Hazelwood.
Because I was born in a place called Hazelwood Castle. Now, it wasn't a real castle. It was a stately home from Norman times. and they put crenellations on the top, and that which gave it castle status. And it's mentioned in the Domesday Book. Now, it was a Catholic seminary for ages after it stopped being a stately home. And then after that, it became a maternity hospital during the time when I was born. So my mother went in there to have me. So I was actually born in Hazelwood Castle. So it's in a village called Hazelwood, which has hazel trees around it. So there's a wood with hazel trees.
You love trees,
yeah.
I hear. You love the oak tree especially? Did I get
Yes, the oak tree is a particularly potent Druid symbol. It means doorway. So you walk through the doorway of the oak tree, into the mysteries.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very connected to the oak trees, the great oaks, because I'm from New Orleans. I'm from Louisiana. Right. And if you've seen them, they're crazy, amazing. And not too long ago, it was probably within like 2 years ago, we went to this haunted known plantation called the Myrtle Plantation. And here I am walking by myself. I don't know why. I don't know where my daughter or my cousin was. I think maybe getting ice cream. And I'm on this pathway. So this reminds me a little bit of your book too, and your poetry. So I'm on this pathway and I am just taken by, the moss in the oak trees and just them all touching each other like they have relationships. Okay. And I began to hum, and I was humming over and over. So then my daughter, my little one, and my cousin find me, and they're like, "What are you humming?" And I'm like, I have no idea where this came from. I even have it on video because I was recording the beautiful trees, and I just got lost in it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Trees are incredible.
Yeah.
Just listening to the wind in the trees. I was out in a place in the Vale of Glamorgan the other day called Dufferin Gardens, which is a peaceful place belonging to the National Trust. And there was a wind blowing, but it wasn't cold. And the treetops were waving, and the wind was incredible going through the trees. And I just stopped and I tuned in, and I usually put my hand on my heart because I like to tune my heartbeat to. I like to think my heartbeat's tuning into the wind in the trees. And then the flowers, the daffodils, were also like they were rippling, in the wind. And the whole thing was like a rhythm. It was quite incredible. And I just stood there, and you get such joy from that, such a feeling of peace and joy from connecting with wind in trees.
I know. And you just described what maybe some people would almost think of heaven like. Heaven. You created heaven right there within your body, right there in that moment. It was free, and you were free.
Absolutely. It's amazing the peace that comes from that. The peace and the feeling of lightness and joy. Almost like you are the song of the wind, you are the song of the treetops, the song of the flowers rippling in the wind. You become a note in the great song.
I do that too. I really do. And, I can think of this one particular time. It was really windy. And there was like this, it was just like almost the sound of a flute because of the way that it was whistling. It had a deep whistle, and literally I could almost hear like music and like a beat, and then I kind of got freaked out. Yeah.
Well, it's very personal, isn't it? I liken it to a harp because the strings ripple, and the wind ripples through the trees, and it ripples on the water outside my window, and it ripples in the flowers. It's like waves, and water is very soulful anyway.
I did almost an entire episode in my mini-series about the lyre. It's true. There is so much healing in nature and in sound and frequency.
Yeah, we don't tap into it. And all you have to do is slow down and start to use the senses. You talk about a sense of soul. You get a sense of soul by using your senses. And people they just rush from one place to another, loads of chatter going on in the mind. And if you just stop talking, stop doing, just stand there and see and hear and feel, You can feel the season changing under your feet. You can hear the spring in the birds' voices. You know, it's just so incredible. I was talking to someone the other day whose grandchild said, Grandma, the birds are talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how many people hear the birds talking nowadays? You don't have to be a child, do you?
Nope, I talk to birds. I'm going to admit it.
You don't have to be a child to hear that.
But you know what? You also hear poetry. It becomes poetic because it's that beautiful. It's like a romance. And so you do become like Shakespeare in those moments.
That's my language of angels. That, you know, it comes in, and I call it in Druidry, we call it the Awan, the stream, the flowing stream. That's the Holy Spirit of the Druids, that you can sing it. And it kind of flows in. And if you belong to something else, you could call it a language of angels. There are different ways of, some people just call it Holy Spirit, but it flows in, and it flows like water, and it kind of flows through my pen. I only put it on my computer later. I like to let it flow through my pen and my hand.
Yeah. I know, like for myself, I feel like I can't stop either. Once I get started, I got to finish it. I'm just like, kids are late for school. There's no dinner done until I'm done.
I know. And even if it gets you up in the middle of the night, sometimes it will get you up before sunrise so you can watch it happen.
For myself, it comes in waves. And it probably is because when I have the space, when I've allowed the space for me just to be, and usually it is outside with the birds, with the trees, with the sun, with the moon.
Yeah, for me, it's nearly always outside. I mean, it can come in the house, and if I open the door, it's stronger than if the door is closed. But outside, that day I'd been in the Vatican, and I went back to Cisterna di Latina, and I sat outside. It was like the well and the brushstrokes of Michelangelo came together, and I wrote a poem called The Language of Angels.
Is it very long? Could you read it?
I can read it if you like. Yes, it's in chapter 2. It begins chapter 2 because all my chapters start with a poem. So, there is peace in dove grey mountains, and in this rich red Roman earth, as late October sunshine wraps my skin in its subtle scent of ripened lemons, the leaves turn slow from green to gold. I see my inspiration like a lighted lamp, and then my mind becoming still at last is more than just a little glad to be here in Italy. Such a warm, embracing place where my own creative truth outruns the waves of restless, racing thoughts, and the sound of my heart's voice rises, speaking soft in the language of angels.
Very lovely. I had a perfect vision of you with your blog post because it gave me the background of that poem.
Okay.
Lovely. Yeah. You know, I want to ask you, because this has happened for me throughout the years. Sometimes what I write, it doesn't sound like me. It sounds like somebody totally different. And actually one of them, and it was during the time of me discovering Bridget, which I don't think I added this to my miniseries, but I kept ending whatever this poem was. It probably is still here in my notes. I kept ending it with "so mote it be," and I'm like, I don't talk like that.
So mote it be. That might be Wiccan. I'm not sure. That could come from quite a few places.
Right. So, have you experienced that?
All the time, I write things and I think, well, where did I get that from? How did I write that? You know, and then you test it out and it works out. You know, it's like something's come through me, and the language sounds a little old-fashioned. It's not hip language, you know, but I didn't write like this when I was younger, this kind of lyrical prose that I write in now. It just happens, it's become my voice. But some of the things I write down, I'm quite surprised at. And I think, well, you know, I'm not sure I knew that. Did a higher part of me know it? But, you know, I'm talking to an angel. I say I'm talking to an angel. Am I channeling an angel? That's what people call it, channeling. Am I channeling lots of other people? Am I channeling a tree when I get ideas from leaning on one? What is it? It's the connection, that everything speaks in the language of angels.
Right.
And I think, sometimes you didn't know that and you were being told it to write down. That makes you a messenger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I'd look back or I'd share with my best friend. And I'm like, can you believe that's some good shit, isn't it? I'm like, I don't know where it came from, but it sure is good.
So you stop for a while and you think, well, how did I know that? Sometimes you can go and look it up on the internet and find connections that way. But other times I just accept it. I wrote it down and I think, well, how did I know that? But it makes total sense. So I'm leaving it. Somebody's telling this to me and I have to put it out because I'm being a messenger.
And poetry is so divine in the way that, for myself anyways, usually brings me to tears.
Yeah.
I have poems that I have a really hard time reading aloud. Do you have those?
Some of them, if they're emotional, I might have difficulty reading them out. If they're pure description, and I'm looking into other realms, or I'm just looking into nature, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing and hearing what I'm hearing, and just writing it down. No, but if I'm looking at my own emotions, maybe I wouldn't read those anyway. I've only ever, put a couple of them out in previously self-published stuff. How I felt at particular times of my life, memories of things, or things I wrote down when I was younger. When emotions were much more raw than they are now.
Were you a writer when you were little?
Yeah, well, I did write stories when I was little. And my background wasn't conducive to female education. My father was a coal miner and my mother cleaned in a school. And basically, back in that time, an intelligent girl would go and be a teacher, a nurse, or a private secretary, which I suppose is called a PA now. And so you didn't have if you came from that kind of working class background, there wasn't a vast possibility at that time for a girl. It was different for boys. Things were more difficult, and I did used to write a lot down because I used to come top of my class in junior school all the time, but it wasn't as important as if a boy had done it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the great mystic. She's not necessarily a poet, but for her time, late 1800s, I don't know if you know, but for the longest time, she just went by HPD, because, she should have been a he.
Yes.
Well,
things were being stabilized after the war, after the Second World War, things went into this women cook dinners and make gravy and men go out to work sort of time in history. When in my first marriage, I think my first husband was musical, and he wrote and he painted, and I think I was a muse. And after the marriage broke up, I became a poet.
You know what? I was going to ask you, did I hear that you were a teacher of French?
I taught French. Yeah.
Okay, so this is hilarious. When I went really deep into my ancestry, and I had found that I could find a lot of information about the French Creole people through music and through poems.
Yeah.
So there was a book called the Les Sonnets. So they have an English version, but for some reason I end up getting the French version.
I know what you mean, because I used to teach literature at A level, and I'd read it in French and then I'd read it in English, and I'd have to I'd always worked in the French version because it just didn't, sometimes it just didn't sound right. I remember the end of one, where it's a Jean-Paul Sartre, where the guy runs out, he's going to be shot, and he goes, non récupérable. And yet in the English version, that says, not worth salvaging. Now, that doesn't work at all. And I used to think, no, that's terrible.
French, it's beautiful in French.
But in French, it was so dramatic.
Yeah, it's dramatic.
It's incredible. Yeah,
oh my gosh. So
do it.
What was interesting, though, not even kidding, Iona, I could read French during my journey.
Wow.
I don't know why. I've never learned French, but I could read it. So, stuff like that again, there's just something divine about language, about words, about history. And I think it's the energy behind it, right? It's the magic behind the words.
It is. It's the Italian language as well. I haven't done, I had Italian neighbors, and I did attempt to speak some Italian, and I had 15 weeks of lessons. But I forget it when I'm not with Italians,
Yeah.
But the sound of it, the life in it, it's incredible. And I don't think you can really understand a country unless you look at the words. Now, here we have two languages. We have Welsh, which is an old Celtic language, and all the kids learn Welsh in school as well as English. My father-in-law was bilingual. I can't speak Welsh, but I can read it because I've taught myself how to read the jumble of letters, that are really quite difficult. I can read it but not speak it. If you go down to the station and wait for a train, you'll get the announcements in two languages. All the road signs are in two languages. It's fun reading it. And I described it as a singing dragon because it goes with the land somehow.
So did you learn Latin as well, being Catholic?
I did learn Latin when I was at school. We had to do 5 years of Latin if you were going to study languages. I've forgotten most of it, but I do remember sayings,
Yeah.
Yeah, I did teach French for about 26 years. And after that, I retrained in psychotherapy and counselling and hypnotherapy. I was ready for a change, and so I did that. And then when my husband was ill several years ago, we moved down here, and we decided we'd retire. I didn't start my practice again because we were in a smaller place, and I was too tired, basically, after all the packing up and the illness and everything. It just seemed, I thought, well, look, I'll do this writing. We'll see how we go. We can afford to live without doing it at the moment. So let's see how it goes. And it's worked out fine.
I want to know about your walks through the labyrinth. We do have a labyrinth here. So have you ever seen the Shining movie with Jack Nicholson?
I have. Yeah.
So it's in the Stanley Hotel. That's here in Colorado. And they have they do have a labyrinth in front of it. So I would love to go.
Is that not maze though?
Oh, I don't know.
Single path. A labyrinth is circular.
It's just circular.
It has a single path that winds through 7 circuits, maybe 11 circuits sometimes even 5 circuits to the center. And in the center is where you meet yourself. And then when you come out again, you walk the same path back out. You just walk it in the opposite direction, you unwind. So the center is where you walk to the center of yourself. Now, lots of other Christians use it, and they have their own reasons for doing that. Some pray all the way around, some meet Christ in the heart, the Sacred Heart at the center, however you want to look at it. When I was working with Christians, I used to work with the Psalms sometimes. Working for myself, I would work more creatively. I would walk around with an idea for a project and then go to the center and then come out releasing what's stuck around that project and see what worked out afterwards. Always there were poems and ideas for me. You can use it with your faith if you have one, or you can just use it for whatever you want. You can use it to solve a problem. You can say, I have this problem to solve. You can, if you're religious, you can pray about the problem. You can just think about the problem and ask for guidance and help if you're not. And you can just walk to the center, spend some time in the center, walk out, ask to release whatever's in the way. And then sometimes ideas come. But always, if it's outside, you can notice the trees around, the flowers, the grass, the season, the sky, everything. Just connect to everything.
Okay, so I was just looking up as we were talking. So some labyrinths are just pathways where they just go in a circle. And I mean, that sounds fine, but I want like the nature. I want the leaves and the bushes around me.
Sorry about that.
Do you know what I'm talking about? I want to be enclosed in like this, with the bushes around me, leading me into
a maze. That looked like a maze on that, where you go into the maze and it has many paths. Some of them go to dead ends.
Oh yeah, right.
That's a maze. You have to solve the puzzle to get to the center and then get back out again. It's a different thing. A lot of people think a maze is a labyrinth, but
yes,
a maze is more difficult.
So, yeah, well, and you could get frustrated. You might get lost.
Yeah, there's a method to it, but I can never remember what it is.
Okay, so a labyrinth, like explain to me what the labyrinth looked like.
You can actually buy a portable one.
What?
Or you can have one on canvas. Or sometimes I've seen one in London that's actually set into the pavement around the major banks in near Lombard Street in the city of London. You can put them anywhere. You can put them in paving stones. You can map them out with stones in gardens. I had a lovely one. I used to walk at the back of a convent. But it's a circular path and it's sacred geometry. If you think about the inside of a shell, how that works, it's a similar shape. You can have 3 circuits, 5 circuits, 7 circuits, 11 circuits if you want a really big one. And then that's the traditional labyrinth, and nobody's quite sure what they were for, but the different people have taken them over as time's gone on. They've become popular again. And then there's the medieval one, which you find in the cathedral in Chartres. Ooh. Which is like a pilgrimage to the centre. It has a rose at the centre.
Well, is that in France?
It's in France, in Chartres. It's just south of Paris. It's like a 6-petaled rose. And you can walk to the centre of that, like you'll find in the New Jerusalem. You know, you will go to the centre of that. And it's more like a snake. It snakes in on itself. And that's an 11-circuit labyrinth.
Have you been there?
I haven't. I keep meaning to go, and I will go at some point. Yes. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be fabulous because it's so old, you know. It put there in medieval times.
We have one here in Colorado, and it says hidden away near Colorado's oldest church is a giant prayer labyrinth.
Right, that's it.
Want to go?
Yes.
Probably hours away.
Yeah. Yeah, if it says it's a labyrinth, not a maze.
It's ginormous.
Wow, that's going to take you a long time to walk it, but maybe you can work a lot of stuff out on that, you know?
I don't know. Maybe I'll send you a picture. What's very interesting about this is about a year ago, I had a dream and I created this, exactly what I'm looking at. And I didn't know what it was. Until right now. So I love it because I'm constantly figuring out stuff over. But it literally says that it was Our Lady of Guadalupe labyrinth. And it's built to embody the mysteries of the Rosary of the Catholic faith.
Okay.
It says, and is billed as being not only a sanctuary, but a shrine, a special place for meditation and invitation to prayer and deepening one's faith. So how does this, so as you're moving through it and you're really just experiencing everything, right? And in, like you said, the middle or the end of this is coming home to yourself or finding yourself and then unwinding and returning, right? And here in this space, you found a lot of poetry.
I found a lot of inspiration. I think to me, I look upon it as I'm going into my own heart. It's a journey into the creative heart.
Creative.
You're going into your own heart. I believe we are responsible, you know, for partly creating our lives, that we are given that responsibility to actually find the direction and to work on it as a quest until we get it right. And I always sort of pull my head down into my heart before I do anything like that, because the head starts thinking, oh, well, you know, that's all wrong and that should be like that. And, you know, and then it starts coming up with things from the past or go into the future. So I pull it down into the heart and try to walk from a heart-centered point of view. So my head's connected to my heart and my heart's connected to my feet. The whole thing is in alignment. So I'm walking on my feet, but I'm aligned to my heart and I'm getting my head to talk to my heart. What comes out of my mouth comes from my heart, not just my head. And that to me is wisdom. That's how you speak wisdom.
Sophia.
Yeah. So if you think Sophia before you go in and then do that, it's always finding that place in the center. The labyrinth has a center that's a Sacred Heart, but we also have that. And I believe that those pictures of Jesus and the Sacred Heart, I believe he was trying to tell us that
The kingdom is inside of you.
We've messed some of the message up over the years or misunderstood it, but I believe there was a much deeper sense of what he was trying to teach us.
And I think that's what my miniseries is about, Iona. That's where I had found that the Gnostic Gospels is so poetic. It was like words I'd never heard, like I am with a lot of poetry. I was hanging on every word.
Yeah.
And it was speaking to my heart. It's the vibration and the intention behind it. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how much I love poetry. I love Labyrinth. I love everything about your book. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It's a big book too.
Yeah, I like to use the poem as a door into the chapter.
Yeah. So what was the time frame that it took you? Where are these poems? Like how long, over how many years did you write these poems?
I wrote these poems are mostly written recently, but there are a few from 10 years ago and some even before. I've kept poems for years and I've put them together gradually. Some of them are quite recent and others are a few years ago. The Language of Angels I wrote in Italy about 10 years ago, but it wasn't until I started looking at the full moon on the water here when we moved here. We moved to a smaller flat first and then we moved here. After my husband started to get a little bit better, and the moon on the water is where the angels started. The full moon for me is the most creative, and it's like I thought, well, what happens then? I've got an angel in here in my forehead, and I've got an angel outside. It's like the two things: am I creating it, or is it creating me? It's what came first, the chicken or the egg, really. And I'll ask questions, so I write a question. And then suddenly the answer drops into my head. I'm not hearing a voice. I'm just getting an answer. My mind produces an answer. And sometimes I don't know where that came from and I didn't know it. I'm just the pen. So I write the conversation. And at the end of that, I've got a full conversation. And I've put 5 of those in there. And I've written quite a few more since I wrote the book.
Do you have a favorite?
I quite like the first one.
Yeah.
Because that was the beginning. I liked all the angel conversations, but the first one was the beginning. And I like the last one where I actually found the name of the angel after I'd been doing the Garden at the Heart of the Universe meditation.
Yes, I love how it always fits together.
Well, we're all wired differently, aren't we? So we all receive in different ways.
I believe that, and I think of that when I think of all of the characters when I was having the journey of figuring out, is Sophia Bridget, this other goddess, and they are definitely all the same energy and archetype.
Well, the ethos of Chalice Well, which is a holy well in Somerset, King Arthur country over the water, is many paths, one source. Many paths, one source. Wherever you're following, wherever you're coming from, there's only one source, which is why we get so many different names.
Oh my God. Have you wrote about that?
Yes, I have. But somebody said to me the other day, when the Romans brought Christianity to Britain, they had to, there were all the pagan gods and goddesses and made them saints.
Yes, they did. And I found that with every single thing in my journey.
But it's still the same energy.
Yes, true.
Maybe it raises up slightly every time anybody does it, but it's still there.
Ooh, good point. You know what I'm seeing now is that just ordinary people are doing saintful things now.
Yeah.
We don't have to be ordained or proved to have, we're all divine.
No, that's true. That's true. There are so many people who are tapping into these new vibrations. Some people can cope with it and other people can't.
That would be a beautiful name for a saint, Iona. There probably is one.
No, there isn't. But my name is after a Scottish island. It's in the Inner Hebrides, and it's a sacred island from St. Columba. Okay. And it's associated with the sacred feminine, with Columba's image of the dove. Was a child of Druids in Ireland, and he went to Iona to start his own thing there, and he was a peacemaker and he was a healer. But Iona is an island in Scotland off the Scottish west coast. So I sat on Iona in the sunset. You know, it's only a very tiny island. It's 3 miles long and a mile and a half wide. You can walk it. Can't have a car unless you live there. It's the most incredible place. It's thin there, you know, you can really feel the world through there. You can tap into the angelic kingdom. You can receive messages in the sunset. It's quite amazing. My mother didn't call me Iona. I have a different name. But after I'd been on Iona, I thought that is what I want for my name. You know, and so if I'm going to create with this name. This speaks to my soul. I see the seals in the water, you know, and then there's the legend of the seals, the soul skin. It just spoke to me. I came away from there. I learned hypnotherapy after that so I could heal with words. And I'm still healing with words, but I'm also hoping to inspire and create a vision of beauty for people, something to lift people up in these terrible times.
Yeah. Who's your favorite poet?
I liked Wordsworth, and it's funny. My home when I was young was called Shelley Crescent.
So there's always the synchronicities here.
Yes. So I quite like the romantics, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you know more than I that Shakespeare, they say, had a lot to do with even the Bible itself.
I like the sonnets. I really like the Shakespeare sonnets. Those are nice. Sometimes I just see something that's quite simple and I think I like that.
Yeah.
Just being open to it from anybody. They don't have to be a famous poet. I just know what I like.
Yeah.
When I read it.
I like the ones that it takes you there. You know, you can close your eyes and be there with you, which I think you did really well on the ones that I've read, and feel it.
That's right.
So you did, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to categorize things really because people are individuals. They write from where they are. If you write from your heart.
My dad was a funny guy. He's passed, but he used to always have this poem. It was, there once was a man from Gorham. He had a pair of pants and he tore them. He stooped and he laughed, for he felt quite a draft because he knew just where he had tore them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had corny jokes, but I always remember that one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing just truly your authentic soul with us.
Well, thank you for asking me. I really, after I read your stuff this morning, I really thought I can't wait to do this now.
Well, you know what? You're very inspiring to me. You really are.
Good. Then what I'm doing is working.
Yeah. Can you tell our listeners where they can get your book?
Well, obviously you can get it on Amazon, but if you don't like Amazon and you want to go to a bookshop, you can order it from any small bookshop. If that's what people want to do, then they can do that. They can order it from my publisher, johnhunt.com. If people go on my website, which is ionajenkins.com, on the page for To Sing with Bards and Angels, there's a whole load of bookshops that you can buy it from. You can buy it in ebook as well on Kobo, Apple. You know, there were so many there. I can't remember them all, but they're all on my website. And
then they can also read a lot. You have actually wrote quite a bit on your website.
Yeah, I've got quite a few blogs on there going back months. Okay. You know, some of them are a publicity for To Sing with Bards and Angels, but others of them are things I wrote before I got into the publicity. Once the thing got published, obviously everything became publicity, but later on it will go back to being about nature and inspiration again at some point. Can they follow you anywhere on social media? They can follow me on Facebook and on Twitter. Well, I'm going to find a labyrinth, and when I do, I'm going to go in the middle. I'm going to take a snapshot and send it to you. Yeah, do that. Yeah, keep in touch and tell me what happened. I'd be really happy to know that. I'll send you a picture of the moon on water outside. Oh my gosh, I would love that. Thank you. Today. It's been great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Sense of Soul podcast, and thanks to our special guests for joining me. If you want more of Sense of Soul, check out my website at www.mysenseofsoul.com, where you can work with me one-on-one or help support Sense of Soul podcast by donating to my coffee fund. Thanks for listening.